The first time I saw him, I was captivated by his charm. The way he smiled, the way his eyes glittered with ambition. But what I didn't know then, what no one had warned me about, was the cruelty hidden beneath that beautiful facade. He had my heart and he crushed it without a second thought. But this isn't a story of sorrow. No, not anymore. This is a tale of betrayal, revenge, and a love so twisted it could only bloom after death. You see, I was reborn. It all started like a dream. I was a young, naive girl, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. Arjun Malhotra, handsome, powerful, a name everyone revered. He was my first love. In the beginning, he promised me the world, a world where we'd be together forever. I believed every word, every kiss. But I never knew he had a dark side. He used me just as a pawn in his grand game. Arjun had it all, money, influence, the world at his feet. He didn't need me, not in the way I thought he did. And yet, I gave him everything. My trust. My heart. One fateful night, everything shattered. Arjun betrayed me in the most heartless way. He sold me out for his own gain. I was left alone, broken, discarded like a cheap trinket. "I don't need you anymore," he'd said, his voice cold as ice. It's over. That was the last time I saw him. Or so I thought. They say the universe works in mysterious ways. For me, it didn't just work, it rewrote my fate. I woke up in a world where everything was different. I was no longer the broken girl who had loved blindly, no longer the woman who had been betrayed. I was someone else. My name wasn't the same. My life was different. I was older, wiser, and my heart, once shattered, was now a cold weapon forged in the fire of betrayal. My memories of the past life were vivid, like scars that refused to fade. And I had one goal: revenge. Arjun Malhotra, he would pay for what he did to me. But this time, I wouldn't chase him. No, this time, he would chase me. In this new life, I made a name for myself. I built an empire from the ground up, using every skill, every connection, and every ounce of power I could muster. I wasn't just a woman with money and influence. No, I was the woman who could topple kingdoms. I bided my time. I watched Arjun from the shadows as he continued his rise to power, his life seemingly perfect. He had everything he wanted except me. But he didn't know I was watching. He didn't know that the girl he betrayed was now a force to be reckoned with. I had one chance to make him feel the same helplessness I felt. One chance to take everything he cared about away. And I would make him beg for my forgiveness. The night we met again was electric. I had orchestrated everything down to the finest detail. Arjun, ever the businessman, was attending a gala hosted by one of my companies. He had no idea that the woman he was speaking with was the same one he had destroyed so many years ago. When our eyes met across the crowded room, a flicker of recognition passed through his gaze. His jaw tightened. His smile faltered for a brief second before he masked it with that signature charm. But I saw through it. I knew him better than anyone. "Fancy seeing you here," he said, his voice smooth, though I could detect the slightest hint of unease. I smiled, a smile he wouldn't recognize. "I thought it was time we caught up, Arjun." We spent the evening talking, and I could feel his interest growing. He was intrigued, captivated by the new me. But there was something more, a power shift. I wasn't the same person who would fall at his feet. And he realized it too. As the night wore on, I took control. I played the game of seduction, of power, of mystery. Every word, every touch was calculated. And he was falling for it. Hard. But then came the twist. Just when I thought I was in control, I felt his hand on mine. It wasn't the touch of someone who sought forgiveness, or even a lover. No, it was possessive. It was the touch of a man who thought he could own me again. He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "You were always mine, you know. You always will be." But it wasn't the same. I wasn't the girl who had given everything for his love. I wasn't the woman who had been betrayed. "I don't think so," I whispered back, my voice barely audible. "You don't own me anymore, Arjun." And that was when I saw it, the crack in his armor. The realization. The fear. He had no idea what was coming next. Arjun's eyes flickered with something unfamiliar, regret, desperation, maybe even a hint of fear. For the first time, I saw him lose control. And it felt good. "I know who you are," he said, his voice softer now, as though trying to plead. "You can't just walk away from me. We had something special, something that nothing else could replace." I raised an eyebrow, my lips curving into a cold smile. "Special?" I repeated. "You must be delusional, Arjun. You didn't have anything special. You had a game to play, and I was just your pawn." The words hit him harder than I expected. His gaze darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might retaliate. But instead, he stood still, as though processing the truth that was finally sinking in. "I've changed," he said, his voice more urgent now. "You're not the same either. I know what I did was unforgivable, but You can't erase what you did to me." I cut him off, my tone icy. "You don't get to apologize and expect me to forgive you. You didn't change. You're still the same manipulative, self-centered person you've always been." Arjun's jaw clenched. But instead of walking away, instead of getting angry, he took a step closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "You're playing a dangerous game, aren't you?" I met his gaze, my eyes unwavering. "I'm not playing anything. This is just the beginning. You'll regret the day you ever crossed me, Arjun." The days that followed were filled with tension. Arjun seemed to be everywhere I went, trying to worm his way into my life again. But this time, it wasn't his charm that worked, it was his desperation. He'd send flowers, expensive gifts, invitations to dinner. At first, I ignored them. But soon, I realized his persistence had become his own trap. I let him chase me. He couldn't fathom that I wasn't the same person he had discarded years ago. He thought I was still that naive girl who would fall for his tricks. But the more he pursued, the more I pushed him away, each rejection a delicious reminder of how much power I now held over him. One evening, as I stepped out of a high-profile meeting, Arjun appeared in front of me, blocking my way. His eyes were intense, filled with frustration, and I could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "Why are you making this so difficult? You know we're meant to be together." I tilted my head, considering his words. "We were never meant to be together, Arjun. That was just your fantasy. And now it's my turn to make you chase me." I walked past him, not sparing him a second glance. But I could feel his eyes on my back, burning with a mixture of anger and longing. Arjun wasn't the only one hiding secrets. As I dug deeper into his life, I discovered something that changed everything. Arjun's rise to power wasn't just about hard work and ambition, it was built on lies, manipulation, and a network of underhanded deals that even I hadn't expected. The more I learned, the more I realized that I wasn't the only one he had betrayed. There were others, women, men, colleagues who had suffered the same fate I had. I wasn't the first to be discarded, but I was determined to be the last. One night, as I sifted through a collection of documents I had obtained from a mysterious source, I found something that made my blood run cold. Arjun had been involved in a scheme that not only ruined lives, but also had the potential to destroy everything I had built. The details were damning. Arjun had orchestrated illegal deals, played people like chess pieces, and left a trail of broken lives behind him. But there was more. Among the papers was a list of names, important people who had helped him, covered up his tracks, and stood by him. And buried deep within those pages, my name. He had never truly let go of me. I wasn't just a pawn in his game. I was a key player, one he had been keeping on standby, just in case he ever needed me again. I needed to act quickly. With the evidence in hand, I made my move. I knew that I could take Arjun down, destroy everything he had built, but I wanted to make him suffer first. I had to make him realize that the one thing he thought he controlled me was now the one thing he could never have. I set the stage for the ultimate betrayal. I arranged a meeting with Arjun, telling him that I was ready to forgive him. I promised him everything he wanted, if only he would meet me in private. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist. When he arrived, his eyes gleamed with triumph. He thought this was the moment he had been waiting for. But he had no idea that this was the moment his world was about to crumble. "You still think you can control me?" I said as he entered the room, his smile growing wider. "You think you can get me back, make me fall in love with you all over again?" "I know I can," he replied confidently. "I always get what I want, and you'll see. We're not finished." I laughed, a sound so cold it sent a chill through the room. No, Arjun. You never had me. And now I'll make sure you never will. Arjun's smirk faltered, his confidence cracking as I pulled out the documents, the evidence of his betrayals, one by one. I laid them out in front of him, watching as his eyes scanned each page, his expression changing from disbelief to dread. You think you can threaten me with this? He scoffed, trying to regain his composure. You think you can destroy me with these petty documents? I shook my head, a cold smile playing on my lips. No, Arjun. I don't need to destroy you with these. You will destroy yourself. I pressed a button on my phone, sending a signal to my people. The door to the room opened, and in walked a few familiar faces, business partners of his, loyal associates who had always been by his side. But this time, their loyalty was no longer to him. Do you really think they'll stand by you after everything you've done? I asked. I've already informed them. I've already made sure they know everything. The men shifted uncomfortably. I saw the hesitation in their eyes. They were no longer sure of where their allegiances lay. Arjun's world, his empire, was crumbling before his eyes. You can't do this, he growled, desperation creeping into his voice. I made you. I gave you everything. I built you into who you are today. You gave me nothing, I replied, my voice icy. You never gave me anything except pain and betrayal. But now, I'm in control. I've built my own empire, and I've waited for this moment, for the moment when you'd finally see that you were never the one in charge. For days, I watched as Arjun tried desperately to regain his footing. He made phone calls, tried to convince his allies, attempted to spin the situation in his favor. But nothing worked. People were slowly pulling away from him, and his power, once so absolute, was slipping through his fingers like sand. The press caught wind of his fall from grace, and soon, the world knew about his dirty deals, his manipulation, and his lies. Arjun became a pariah, his name tainted beyond repair. His empire began to crumble, and he had no choice but to watch it all fall apart. But there was one thing Arjun didn't know. This was all part of my plan. The documents, the leaks, the betrayals I exposed, they were all calculated moves. I hadn't just been playing him. I had been playing everyone. I knew exactly what strings to pull, what buttons to press. The game wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. As Arjun sank deeper into his own downfall, something unexpected happened. One evening, just as I thought I had him cornered, he reached out to me again. This time, he wasn't the arrogant, powerful man I once knew. He was broken, defeated. But beneath the layers of regret and humiliation, there was a flicker of something I hadn't anticipated, genuine sorrow. I made a mistake, he confessed, his voice trembling. I know I can't undo what I did to you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please don't destroy me completely. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing the man he had become. The man who had once stolen everything from me, and now was begging for mercy. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But as I stared into his eyes, I realized something that I hadn't considered before. This was no longer about revenge. I had won. I had taken everything from him, made him feel the pain he had caused me. But now that I was on top, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really enough? For the first time in years, I began to question everything. I could see the vulnerability in Arjun's eyes, but I wasn't sure whether to trust it. Had he truly changed, or was this another one of his manipulations? The idea that he might be genuinely sorry, that he might be seeking redemption, threw me off balance. Why should I believe you? I asked, my voice hard but unsure. You've already shown me who you are. You betrayed me once. Why should I think this time is any different? His eyes filled with pain, and for the first time, I saw the mask he wore start to crack. Because I can't live with what I did to you, he whispered. I can't live with the guilt. I love you. And I never stopped. Those words hit me like a wave, crashing against the walls I had built around my heart. I wanted to dismiss him. I wanted to tell him to leave, to never come near me again. But something in his voice, something in the way he looked at me, made it impossible to turn away. I stood there, torn between the woman I had become and the woman I used to be, the woman who had loved him with everything she had. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest as Arjun's words echoed in my mind. I love you. And I never stopped. For a moment, everything around me blurred. The plans I had so carefully orchestrated, the empire I had built from the ashes of my betrayal, felt irrelevant. Was this what I had wanted all along? To make him suffer? To watch him fall? Or had I, somewhere along the way, forgotten that I had once loved him? I shook my head, trying to clear the confusion clouding my thoughts. You love me? I repeated, unable to grasp the reality of his words. Arjun took a tentative step toward me, his voice steady but filled with raw emotion. Yes, I've loved you since the moment we met. But I was foolish, selfish. I thought I could have everything. And I thought you'd always be there, waiting for me. I was wrong. The silence between us stretched, the weight of his confession hanging heavily in the air. I should have felt empowered, in control, victorious. After all, I had brought him to his knees. But instead, a strange vulnerability stirred inside me, one I hadn't expected to feel after everything he had done. You don't get to come to me now, Arjun, I said, my voice trembling despite myself. You don't get to ruin my life and then just come back, pretending nothing happened. But even as the words left my mouth, a part of me wondered, could I really continue holding on to this hatred? Arjun's eyes darkened with regret, but there was something more, desperation. I'll do anything, please. I can't undo what I did, but I can make things right. Let me prove it to you. Please. The following days were filled with chaos. Arjun's fall from grace continued, but he refused to give up. Every day he would show up at my office, at my home, wherever I went, desperate to prove his sincerity. He sent me messages, flowers, gifts, and most disturbingly, letters of apology, each one more heartfelt than the last. But I wasn't sure if I could believe him. Could I really trust him again after everything he had done? His words felt too easy, too rehearsed, like they were coming from a man who had just learned the true meaning of regret. Or maybe they were the desperate pleas of a man who had lost everything, including his own dignity. I decided to test him. One night, I invited him to a private dinner. I wanted to see if the man who stood before me was truly someone who had changed, or if he was still the same man who had betrayed me so cruelly. Arjun arrived on time, looking more refined, more composed than I had ever seen him. Yet there was an edge to him, a rawness, that made him seem more human than I remembered. We sat across from each other in silence for a while, the tension thick in the air. Then I finally spoke, my voice calm but unwavering. You think you can fix this? I asked. You think you can erase everything you've done? I know I can't erase it, Arjun replied quietly. But I can show you that I've changed. I've spent the last few weeks getting rid of the people who helped me lie, the ones who built my empire with deception. I'm tearing everything down, even my own legacy, to make things right. I narrowed my eyes. And why should I believe you? Why should I believe that this time you're being honest? He hesitated for a moment before responding. Because I don't just want you back, I want to make amends. I've been a fool and I've hurt too many people along the way. I'm trying to right my wrongs, no matter the cost. I leaned back in my chair, studying him carefully. The man sitting before me was not the same confident, ruthless Arjun I had known. This Arjun was different. He was broken, vulnerable, and for the first time in a long time, he seemed genuine. But could I let myself fall for it? Could I trust him again, knowing what he had done? As the days went by, I watched Arjun's attempts to rebuild himself. He had severed ties with his shady business partners, liquidated assets that had been gained through dishonest means, and taken steps to make his empire transparent. There was no question that his actions were sincere. But there was still one thing left me. I had to decide whether I would allow myself to love him again. Then, one evening, as I sat alone in my office, a package arrived for me. It was a small, unassuming box. I opened it with curiosity, only to find a single photo inside. It was an old photo of us, Arjun and me, taken in the early days of our relationship. On the back, in his unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I never deserved you. But if you give me one more chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you." The words hit me harder than I expected. I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to crack, the cold armor I had worn for so long starting to falter. But just as I was about to pick up my phone and call him, a knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. It was one of Arjun's former associates, a man I had never trusted. And he had something to tell me. The man in the doorway stood with a knowing look in his eyes, his posture tense. His presence sent a ripple of unease through me. He was someone I had never fully trusted during Arjun's rise to power, and now, seeing him here, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up my spine. "You're here for a reason," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "What do you want?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His eyes flickered to the photo on my desk, then back to me. "I have something you need to know about Arjun," he said, his tone low and cautious. My heart skipped a beat. "What about him?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. The man hesitated before speaking again. "Everything he's told you, everything he's been doing, there's more to it than you think. It's not as simple as him turning over a new leaf." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He took a deep breath and lowered his voice further. "I know you've been watching him, keeping track of his actions. But he's been hiding something from you. Something that could destroy everything he's been trying to rebuild. And something that might change everything you thought you knew about him." The room felt smaller, the air heavier as the man continued. "Arjun didn't just betray you because of his ambition. He did it because he was forced into it. There are people involved, dangerous people. People who have been controlling him from the shadows." I shook my head, disbelief clouding my thoughts. "I don't understand. Who could have forced him to do anything? He's always been in control." The man looked around, checking to see if anyone was listening before he spoke again. "You've heard of the syndicate, haven't you? The one that operates under the radar, pulling strings in every major industry? Arjun's rise wasn't just the result of his own ambition. It was because they made him rise. They're the ones who had him by the throat, and they're the ones who orchestrated the betrayal." My heart raced as the implications of his words sank in. "The syndicate?" I repeated, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Are you telling me Arjun was just a pawn in their game?" "Yes," the man said grimly. "And he didn't have a choice. He was tangled in their web long before you even met him. The decisions he made, the people he betrayed, including you, were all to secure his position in the syndicate's network. And when he finally tried to break free, they made sure to ruin him." I stood there, stunned, my mind struggling to process the information. Arjun, the man I had once loved, the man who had destroyed me. Had he been forced into all of it? Was he truly the victim here as much as I had been? But why didn't he tell me any of this? I asked, my voice trembling. Why keep it a secret? Why pretend he was just a heartless bastard who wanted to use me? The man's expression softened, though his eyes were still filled with an urgency I couldn't ignore. Because he didn't want you to be involved. He didn't want you to get caught in the crossfire. He was trying to protect you, even if it meant pushing you away. But the syndicate doesn't care about loyalty or love. They just care about power. And they're not done with him yet. I could feel the ground shift beneath me, my world tilting in a way I hadn't expected. Everything I thought I knew about Arjun, everything I had built my anger and my revenge upon, was suddenly in question. But the most important question remained. What now? The man's revelation threw me into turmoil. I had spent so much time crafting my revenge, thinking I was taking control of my life, when in reality I had been reacting to a version of Arjun that wasn't entirely his own. How much of his betrayal was truly his fault? And how much of it was because of forces far beyond his control? I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let this go. Not after everything he had done. But what if there was more to this story? What if Arjun had genuinely been trying to make amends? Was I willing to sacrifice any chance at happiness, at redemption, just to see him suffer? I glanced at the photo on my desk once again, the words on the back haunting me. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I never deserved you. But if you give me one more chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you. I had to make a choice. I looked at the man who had come to warn me. Where is he now? I asked, my voice steady but carrying an underlying sense of urgency. He's trying to leave the country. He knows they'll come for him soon, he replied. But if you don't act fast, they'll get to him first. And when they do, it won't just be him they take down. The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. Arjun was in more danger than I could have ever imagined. And yet, all I could think about was how I had suffered. how I had been left broken and betrayed. Could I still feel sympathy for him, even now? I didn't have much time to decide. But I knew I had to make a choice, one that would shape not just my future, but possibly Arjun's as well. "Tell me everything you know," I said, my voice firm, my mind racing with possibilities. "And then we'll make sure he's safe. Together." The man nodded, his expression grim. He understood that this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about something bigger, something more dangerous. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice even further as if to shield his words from being overheard. "The syndicate is a shadow organization with ties to every major sector, business, politics, even law enforcement. Arjun became their tool, a puppet in their games. They pushed him to the top, made sure his every move was monitored and controlled, and used his ambition to get what they wanted." I listened, every word feeling like a weight on my chest. This was not just about betrayal anymore. This was about survival. Arjun wasn't the only one who had been trapped in their web. I too was a pawn in their game. "What do you mean, they'll come for him?" I asked, trying to wrap my mind around what this meant for me, for Arjun, for everything we had been through. "What do they want from him now?" The man's face darkened. "They've already set their sights on him. He's not their only asset, but he's a valuable one. If they think he's trying to back out, they'll make sure he disappears. No one crosses the syndicate and survives. They'll stop at nothing to maintain control." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Arjun might have been trying to protect me by keeping me in the dark, but now I was fully aware of the danger he was in. The question was no longer about whether or not I could forgive him. It was about whether or not I could save him from a fate worse than anything he had put me through. "Where is he?" I asked, urgency in my voice. "Last I heard, he's holed up at a safe house on the outskirts of the city," the man replied. "But it won't be long before they track him down." I stood up, my mind already racing with the plan to find him. I had made Arjun pay for everything he'd done to me. But now, the tables had turned. It was no longer just about him. It was about saving him from the very people who had manipulated us both. I knew this wouldn't be easy. Arjun's enemies were ruthless, and the syndicate had a vast network of resources. Finding him would be difficult, and protecting him would be even harder. But I was determined. I couldn't let him fall into their hands. No matter how much he had hurt me, I wasn't going to let him become another victim of this dark world. I quickly gathered a few trusted allies, people I had worked with in the past, people who owed me favors. Together, we pieced together the clues that would lead us to the safe house. But as we got closer, I could feel the tension mounting. Every turn, every shadow could be hiding a threat. When we finally arrived at the location, I had to stop myself from rushing in. This wasn't just about saving Arjun, it was about making sure we were one step ahead of the syndicate. I motioned to my team to spread out, to check the area for any signs of danger. We had to be cautious. As I approached the entrance to the safe house, my heart began to race. This was it, the moment of truth. I had no idea what I would find inside or if Arjun would even be there. But I couldn't turn back now. I pushed open the door, my hand shaking slightly as I reached for the handle. The room was empty. But I didn't have time to feel relieved. The moment my eyes scanned the space, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. A note left on the table. I picked it up, reading the words scrawled in black ink. "You should have stayed away. It's too late now." I froze. The syndicate had known we were coming. They were always one step ahead. And then, I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me. I spun around just in time to see a figure emerge from the shadows. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized him. It was Arjun. He looked disheveled, his face gaunt from stress, but there was no mistaking the relief in his eyes when he saw me. He took a step toward me, his voice filled with emotion. "I told you to stay away. You shouldn't have come." I stared at him, torn between anger and concern. "You think I would just let you walk away from this? Let them take you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You betrayed me once, Arjun. I won't let them destroy you, not when I know the truth now." Arjun looked at me with guilt in his eyes. "You don't understand. It's not just me they'll come after. They'll hurt you too. The syndicate doesn't let anyone go. I'm already in this with you," I said, stepping closer to him. "If we don't stop them now, they'll never let either of us live in peace." Arjun looked at me for a long moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. We need to get out of here. They're already on their way. They'll be here any minute. But before we could make our move, the sound of an engine roaring to life outside reached our ears. Someone was here. Someone from the syndicate. I looked at Arjun, my heart racing. What do we do now? His eyes hardened with determination. Now we fight. Arjun's words rang in my ears. Now we fight. There was no time to second guess. No time to plan for every possible outcome. The sound of approaching footsteps outside the door grew louder, followed by the unmistakable roar of an engine idling as if waiting for its next victim. We had moments, maybe seconds, before the syndicate's men would storm the place. I turned to Arjun, who was already moving to a corner of the room where a large, steel-reinforced door led to the back alley. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were focused. Focused on survival. We're not going down without a fight, I said, my voice firm as I scanned the room for any kind of weapon or means of defense. It was a small, isolated space with few tools at our disposal. But desperation could turn anything into a weapon. Arjun grabbed a crowbar from a shelf near the door and handed it to me. Stay close. Keep your head down, and whatever happens, don't get separated. I nodded, my grip tightening around the cold metal. The sound of the engine revving again told me we had no more time. The enemy was here, and they were ready for action. Suddenly, the door flew open with a violent crash, splintering against the wall. Two figures dressed in black tactical gear stormed in, guns drawn, their eyes scanning the room with deadly precision. Arjun didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, swinging the crowbar with force, knocking one of the men to the ground. The other one fired a shot, narrowly missing me, and I dove to the side, slamming into the wall. The sound of gunfire echoed through the room, adding a chaotic, frantic energy to the already high-stakes situation. I scrambled to my feet, trying to block out the noise of my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I lunged at the second man, swinging the crowbar with all my strength. The metal collided with his wrist, sending the gun flying across the room. He shouted in pain, and I didn't give him the chance to recover. I grabbed the gun off the floor and aimed it directly at him. Move and you're dead, I hissed, my finger hovering over the trigger. The man froze, his breath shallow as he realized he was out of options. I could feel Arjun's eyes on me as he dealt with the other assailant. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, both of us caught in the dangerous dance of survival. But I didn't trust myself to take another step. Every second we spent here, fighting for our lives, meant that the syndicate was tightening its grip around us. I had to think fast. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Arjun nodded, his face set in a grim expression. They'll be back with more. We don't have much time. Before I could respond, the sound of multiple engines roared to life outside. This wasn't just one or two men, it was an entire operation, and we were caught in the middle of it. Go, I shouted, urging Arjun to move. We can't fight all of them. We dashed toward the back door, slipping into the narrow alleyway. The cool night air hit my skin, but the relief of being out of the building was short-lived. The alley was dark, with only the faint glow of streetlights far off in the distance. There were no hiding spots, no cover. Just a dead end ahead and no obvious way out. We need a plan, Arjun said, glancing around quickly, his face pale with exhaustion. We can't just run forever. I know, I muttered, already working through the options in my head. But we can't face them head-on, not yet. We need to get off the streets, blend in somewhere, or they'll have us cornered in no time. I spotted a series of fire escapes on the buildings to our left. It wasn't much of a solution, but it was our only shot. Up there, I said, pointing toward the nearest ladder. If we can get to the rooftops, we might be able to escape the city. Arjun didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the fire escape, gripping the ladder with a sense of urgency that mirrored my own. I followed closely behind him, my pulse racing as I heard the distant hum of engines turning a corner. We had to move faster. The climb was awkward, the metal ladder groaning beneath our weight as we hauled ourselves up. The moment we reached the top, I pulled myself onto the rooftop and turned to look back. We weren't alone. Figures were emerging from the alley below, their silhouettes barely visible in the dim light. They were getting closer. Move, Arjun urged, pulling me toward the edge of the rooftop. We didn't have time to waste. The city's skyline stretched out before us, vast and endless, but our safety depended on getting lost in its maze. We ran across the rooftop, leaping over small obstacles and dodging the occasional loose debris. Behind us, the sound of heavy boots hitting the rooftop echoed, followed by shouted commands. They were closing in. But just as I thought they had us trapped, I spotted something ahead, a bridge connecting this building to another one further down the street. It was our only way forward, and it was just close enough. "Arjun, jump!" I yelled. Without a second thought, he sprinted toward the gap between the buildings, leaping across with a force that made my heart stop. He landed on the other side with a soft thud and turned to look back at me, holding his hand out. My breath caught in my throat as I ran toward him, praying I could make the jump. The distance between the buildings was enough to make me hesitate, but there was no turning back. I ran, the wind whipping through my hair, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed off the edge of the rooftop with everything I had, just as the sound of footsteps grew louder behind me. And then, I was flying through the air. The world seemed to slow as I soared through the air, my heart racing, every muscle in my body stretched taut with fear and adrenaline. For a moment, I could barely breathe, the gap between the buildings looking impossibly wide. I couldn't afford to miss. This was my only chance. The sound of my shoes hitting the edge of the rooftop echoed in my ears as I pushed myself forward. My body lurched, the distance between the two buildings closing fast, and then, thud. I landed hard on the other side, nearly losing my balance but managing to stay on my feet. I barely had a moment to recover when Arjun was there, his hand reaching out to steady me. "You made it," he said, his voice tinged with relief but still filled with urgency. We didn't have time to celebrate. The men on the rooftops behind us were closing in, their footsteps growing louder as they moved with precision. There was no doubt in my mind, this was far from over. I turned to look ahead. Another building lay across the street, and beyond that, the city's sprawling network of alleyways and streets opened up. It was our chance to vanish, to escape the syndicate's clutches before they had a chance to corner us again. "We can't stop." "Not yet," I said, breathless but determined. Arjun nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. "We'll find a way out. They won't stop hunting us, but we won't stop running either." We moved quickly across the rooftops, leaping from one to the next with only the city lights guiding our path. Each jump, each stride felt like it could be the one where everything went wrong, but somehow we kept making it. My legs ached, my lungs burned from the exertion, but there was no choice but to keep going. After several rooftops, we finally slowed down, ducking behind a low wall on the edge of one building to catch our breath. Below, the streets were lit by street lamps, cars honking in the distance, oblivious to the chase unfolding above them. But the danger was far from over. We still didn't know where to go or how to lose the men who were hot on our trail. "They'll be looking for us in the streets," Arjun said, scanning the area. "We need to disappear. Fast." "I know," I muttered, trying to think through the chaos in my mind. "We can't just keep running through the rooftops forever. We need a place to hide, somewhere they won't think to look." I remembered the alleyways below. Some of them wound through the older parts of the city, places that were abandoned, forgotten by most. If we could reach one of those alleyways, we might have a chance to blend in and disappear into the crowd. But the risk was enormous. The syndicate had eyes everywhere. They would have people watching the streets, waiting for anyone to slip up. "We can make it to the old district," I said, feeling a surge of hope. "There are places there no one will think to look. If we can get there, we'll have a fighting chance." Arjun didn't hesitate. He was already moving toward the edge of the building, preparing for the next leap. "Lead the way," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos that had consumed us. The old district was a maze of narrow streets, abandoned warehouses, and forgotten buildings. It was a place where few ventured, where the shadows seemed to swallow everything whole. It was exactly the kind of place the syndicate would overlook. They were too used to operating in the bright lights of power and wealth. This area was beneath their notice. We reached the edge of the district just as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. The quiet streets were empty, the buildings looming around us like silent witnesses to a forgotten time. But even here, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as we moved deeper into the district, the sounds of our footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. "We can't stay out here for long," I whispered to Arjun. "We need to find shelter." We pushed on, navigating the winding alleyways until we found an abandoned building that seemed to have been untouched for years. Its rusted doors creaked as we entered, and the air inside was thick with dust and decay. The place looked like it had been a storage warehouse once, its windows boarded up and its floor littered with old crates. "This will have to do," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to rest, but we also need a plan." Arjun nodded, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. "We can't stay here long. We're exposed, and they'll be looking for us. We'll need to figure out our next move." I sank onto a dusty crate, trying to catch my breath. "We need to find out everything we can about the syndicate, what they want with us, and why they're chasing us so hard. If we can get ahead of them, maybe we can finally put an end to this." Arjun looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and fear. "We can't do this alone. We'll need allies, people we can trust. And we'll need a way to make them pay for everything they've done." I felt the same fire that burned in his eyes. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about taking down the people who had ruined both of our lives. We weren't just running. We were going to fight back. "We need to get in touch with my old contacts," I said, standing up. "People who have the power to help us. If we can mobilize them, we might have a chance." Just as I was about to move toward the corner of the building to make a call, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out quickly, my heart racing as I saw the caller ID. It was an unknown number. I stared at the unknown number flashing on my phone screen, my pulse quickening. In a situation like this, calls from unfamiliar numbers were always dangerous, but this one felt different. It could be someone from the syndicate, or it could be someone with information that could help us. I glanced at Arjun, who was watching me carefully. He could see the hesitation in my eyes. "Answer it," he urged, his voice low. "We need all the help we can get right now." I swallowed hard, steeling myself before I swiped to answer. My finger trembled slightly as I put the phone to my ear. "This is your name," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising tension. "Who is this?" There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a voice that sent chills down my spine. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, a voice I had hoped I would never hear again. "It's me," the voice said, cold and deliberate. "I know you're running, and I know Arjun's with you." My heart skipped a beat. My eyes shot to Arjun, whose face had gone ashen at the mention of his name. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to sound confident, but the unease in my gut was growing. The voice chuckled darkly. "Doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you have something we want. Something the syndicate will stop at nothing to get." A chill ran through me, and I tightened my grip on the phone. "What do you want?" The voice lowered, almost as if savoring the moment. "The truth about Arjun. You think he's innocent, don't you? You think he's just been a pawn in a game he couldn't escape? Let me tell you something, he's not." Arjun's eyes widened in confusion, but I raised my hand to stop him from speaking. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice shaking now. "What truth?" There was a long silence on the other end before the voice finally responded. "You should have listened to me when you had the chance. Arjun isn't the man you think he is. He's been playing both sides. You've been chasing the wrong enemy all along." I felt a sharp, cold stab of confusion and doubt. "No, that can't be true," I whispered. But even as I said it, a part of me couldn't shake the growing suspicion that the world around me was not as simple as it seemed. The voice continued, its tone more sinister now. "You'll learn the truth soon enough. The syndicate's power runs deep. And Arjun, he's the key." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, as the weight of the conversation sank in. Arjun was staring at me, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. "What did they say?" he asked, his voice tight. "Who was that?" I slowly lowered the phone, feeling a mix of disbelief and growing dread. "It was someone who knows about us." "About what's been happening," I said, trying to steady my voice. They said you're not who I think you are." Arjun's expression darkened, and he took a step forward, his fists clenched. "What are they accusing me of?" "I don't know what the hell is going on, but you have to trust me. Everything I've done, I did to protect you. I never meant to hurt you." I shook my head, frustration bubbling up inside me. "They're saying you've been playing both sides. That you're the key to everything. Arjun's face paled. What does that mean? I don't. Before he could finish, the sound of a distant engine caught my attention. Footsteps echoed outside the building. Someone was coming. They're here, I whispered, my heart racing. The message had made one thing clear. There was something even bigger at play, and I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. We need to move, Arjun said, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the back of the building. We can't stay here. Not with the syndicate closing in. I nodded, fear clawing at me as we hurried through the abandoned warehouse. But in the back of my mind, a question lingered. Had Arjun been playing me all along? We made our way through the labyrinth of old crates and rusted metal beams, trying to find a way out of the building. Every corner seemed to lead to another dead end, but we kept moving, adrenaline coursing through our veins. Arjun was ahead, his movements swift and calculated. I followed close behind, my mind racing with the information from the phone call. The words echoed in my head. Arjun isn't the man you think he is. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I actually knew about him. Had I been blinded by my emotions? Had I been so focused on revenge that I ignored the deeper truth? I tried to push those thoughts away. We were still in danger. We still needed to escape. But that lingering doubt wouldn't go away. We reached the back of the building, where a rusty fire exit door led to a narrow alley. It was our only chance at freedom. We're almost there, Arjun said, his voice low. We need to get to the car. We'll figure this out on the way. But just as we were about to step outside, a sharp voice shouted from the shadows. Stop right there. The voice rang out from the shadows, cold and commanding. My heart skipped a beat, and every muscle in my body tensed. We weren't alone anymore. Whoever it was, they had us cornered. I turned sharply, my eyes scanning the alley, but I couldn't see anyone at first. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged, tall, wearing a dark jacket and a cap that obscured most of their face. The person's presence alone was enough to send a chill down my spine. They exuded power, like they were in control of every situation, no matter how dangerous. Who the hell are you? I demanded, my voice steady but strained with the tension in the air. The figure didn't immediately answer. Instead, they took a step closer, their eyes gleaming with a mix of amusement and cold calculation. Arjun moved slightly in front of me, instinctively positioning himself between me and the stranger. I could ask you the same question, the figure replied, their voice low and controlled. But I already know who you are. The question is, who are you really? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The question hung in the air, loaded with something darker. Arjun's eyes narrowed as he took a protective stance beside me, his jaw tight with anger. Who the hell are you? Arjun repeated, his voice sharper now, more defensive. You're wasting our time. We need to leave. The stranger didn't seem to be in a hurry. They stepped forward, taking slow, deliberate strides. You don't get it, do you, Arjun? You've been playing this game for far too long, and now it's time to pay the price. I looked at Arjun, his face a mask of confusion and tension. Do you know them? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Arjun's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place, recognition, maybe fear, but before he could respond, the stranger pulled something from their jacket. A small device, sleek and black, which they held out in front of them. I'm not here to fight, the figure said, but I'm here to give you a choice. A choice that will decide whether you both walk away from this alive or whether this ends in bloodshed. I could feel my heart racing again. This was no longer just about surviving, it was about deciding who we could trust, who we could rely on. The figure didn't give us time to think. They pressed a button on the device, and suddenly, the alley was filled with the sound of muffled clicks, like a dozen locks unlocking at once. And then, from the shadows, more figures appeared, emerging from different points of the alley. They weren't alone. Whoever this person was, they had an entire team with them. Arjun's body stiffened. What do you want? He asked, his voice strained. He could tell that things were spiraling out of control fast, and we needed answers, not threats. The figure raised their hand, signaling the others to halt. You don't have much time, they said, their tone now more urgent. The syndicate is closing in on you both. And what I know could be the only thing that gives you a chance. But, Arjun. They paused, a smirk flickering at the corner of their lips. You need to decide. Do you want the truth? I could see the conflict in Arjun's eyes. He was already on the edge, and now this figure was pushing him further. What truth? What was the figure talking about? You'll need to trust me if you want to get out of this alive. The stranger continued, their voice barely above a whisper. But be warned, once you know the truth, there's no going back. My mind was spinning. The stakes were higher than ever. Was this person truly offering us a way out, or were they another part of the game we were trying to escape? Arjun turned toward me, his eyes searching mine as if asking for permission to trust this person. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me. What's the catch? I finally asked, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. The stranger smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. The catch? Simple. You follow me. You get the answers you need. Or you stay out here and face the syndicate's wrath. It's your choice. I glanced at Arjun, who was still processing what was happening, his face a mixture of disbelief and frustration. The more I looked at him, the more I wondered. Could we trust this person? Or had we just walked straight into another trap? Arjun finally spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. Let's go. We don't have any other options. The stranger nodded, then gestured for us to follow. We walked in silence as the stranger led us through the dark alleys of the city. The whole area seemed to be eerily quiet, as if the whole world had gone into hiding. The only sounds were the soft footsteps of our group and the distant hum of the city. Eventually, we reached an old warehouse at the end of a deserted street. It was a nondescript building, its windows boarded up and its door locked tight. The stranger moved quickly to a side entrance and typed in a code on a keypad hidden by the wall. The door clicked open, and they ushered us inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the world outside. The warehouse was well lit, filled with rows of computers, files, and equipment. It looked like an operations hub, a place where secrets were kept, plans were made, and deals were struck. This is where we need to be, the stranger said, their voice echoing in the empty space. Now you'll get your answers. Arjun and I exchanged wary glances before stepping inside. The door slammed shut behind us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just stepped into a much larger game than we had realized. What is this place? I asked, my voice low, the unease creeping back into my chest. It's where everything ends and where everything begins, the stranger said cryptically. You want to know the truth? It's all here. They pointed to a nearby desk, where a stack of files was neatly arranged. I felt my heart race. The truth that had eluded us for so long. I could barely breathe as I stepped forward, reaching for the first file in the stack. The stranger watched us carefully, as if waiting for us to make the most important decision of our lives. I opened the first file, feeling the weight of it in my hands. The folder was thick, filled with documents, photographs, and printed emails that looked like they had been meticulously organized. As I flipped through the pages, I could feel my pulse quicken with each new piece of information. Is this for real? I muttered, my voice trembling as I stared at a photograph of Arjun with several unfamiliar figures. They were sitting around a table, shaking hands, with what looked like a deal being made. But the faces of those people were menacing, and they were connected to the syndicate, the very people we were running from. Arjun stepped up beside me, his face pale as he saw the picture. What is this? He whispered. I don't know those people. The stranger stepped forward, their expression cold and unreadable. You're lying to yourself if you think you don't know them. That's the syndicate's inner circle. And Arjun, you were part of it. The words hit me like a hammer. I could see the confusion and the guilt in Arjun's eyes, but there was something else there, something darker. Something I hadn't expected. I was never part of this, Arjun said, his voice strained. I didn't know who they were when it started. I swear. The stranger's laugh was hollow, lacking any warmth. You didn't know who they were? Don't kid yourself, Arjun. You were always part of their plans, whether you wanted to admit it or not. You were the key to their rise, the perfect pawn, the perfect weapon to do their bidding. And all along, you've been in the dark about your own role in their game. I looked at Arjun, my mind reeling. The pieces didn't fit. Or maybe they did. Maybe he wasn't just a victim after all. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, my voice sharp. Why didn't you tell me what was really happening? You let me fall for you, thinking you were just another victim, and now this. This? Arjun's face twisted with regret and anguish, but it didn't change the truth that was right in front of us. He didn't speak at first. The silence between us felt suffocating, as though the weight of our entire past together was crashing down on us both. I didn't know how to tell you, Arjun said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I could play their game long enough, I could get us out of this. But I was wrong. I've been running from the truth just as much as you've been running from me. The stranger raised a hand, signaling for silence. Enough talk. The truth is in those files. It's not about guilt or redemption now. It's about what you're going to do with it. I didn't look at Arjun. Instead, I turned my focus back to the folder, flipping through the pages. The more I read, the darker everything became. There were contracts, names, and transactions, deals that spanned years involving government officials, businessmen, and international crime syndicates. But the most shocking discovery was the final page. I stopped when I saw my name. I read it again. And again. They've been tracking me, I whispered, the realization dawning on me. This whole time, they've known who I am. They've been watching me, even when I thought I was safe. Arjun's gaze shifted from the papers to me, and I could see the guilt in his eyes. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. But they know everything. They've always known. I closed the file, my hands trembling as I placed it on the desk. What are we supposed to do now? How do we even begin to fight something this big? The stranger stepped forward, their eyes narrowing. You don't fight them. You destroy them. And I'm going to show you how. I turned to look at them, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you mean by destroy? How can we even do that when we're already caught in their trap? They leaned in closer, their voice low but steady. The syndicate has been pulling the strings of this city for years. You've been playing their game, whether you knew it or not. But now, it's time to turn the tables. It's time to make them pay for everything they've done. I didn't respond immediately, letting their words sink in. Was this really the opportunity we've been waiting for, or was it another trap? But one thing was certain, I couldn't walk away from this. Not now, not after everything we had discovered. Tell me what to do, I said, finally meeting their gaze. We'll do whatever it takes to take them down. The stranger smiled, but there was something cold behind it. Good. I knew you'd make the right choice. But be warned, there's no going back once you start this. They gestured toward the files, the room, and then to the map on the wall where locations and names were marked in red. Follow the path in these documents, the stranger said, their voice now tinged with a hint of excitement. The syndicate's downfall begins with their own secrets. And once you learn how deep they've buried their lies, you'll be the one pulling the strings. Arjun and I exchanged a glance. There was no turning back now. We had come too far, and the only way out was forward. We had a mission to bring down the syndicate. The stranger's words hung heavy in the air. I could feel the weight of the decision we had just made, and the gravity of the task ahead. We weren't just playing a game anymore. We were about to wage war against the most powerful force in the city. And it wasn't going to be easy. I glanced at Arjun, whose face had taken on a more hardened, determined look. He wasn't the same man I had once known, the naive, hopeful man who had been swept up in something bigger than him. This was a man who had seen the truth, and now he had no choice but to fight. What's the first step? I asked, my voice steady but filled with a mix of apprehension and resolve. The stranger didn't hesitate. The first strike is always the most important. The syndicate's foundation is built on a network of corrupt officials, business deals, and blackmail. You need to hit them where it hurts the most by exposing their secrets. The more public their fall, the faster their control over this city will crumble. I felt the fire of determination flare inside me. We had the tools now, the documents, the names, and the locations. The syndicate's carefully built empire of lies was at our fingertips, waiting to be torn down. But we had to be strategic. A single misstep could bring everything crashing down on us. We'll need to get the media involved, I said, thinking through the plan. We expose them to the public, force their hand. If we can make their secrets go viral, their empire will begin to fall apart. The stranger nodded. Exactly. The media is the first weapon, but there are other ways to bring them down. You'll need to use your resources, contacts, leverage. If you want to destroy them, you have to use their own tactics against them. I looked at the stack of documents in front of me again, the names of corrupt businessmen, government officials, and syndicate members all marked in red ink. These were the pieces of the puzzle that would bring them to their knees. Arjun stepped forward, his voice low but filled with conviction. Let's do it. We expose them and then we go after the rest of their operation. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. We were about to step into a battle that would take everything we had. But there was no turning back now. We had to see this through to the end. All right, I said, locking eyes with Arjun. Let's start by contacting my sources in the media. We'll leak the first set of documents, enough to get their attention, but not too much to give us away. The stranger nodded again, their expression unreadable. It's not just the media you'll need to worry about. The syndicate has eyes everywhere, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way. You need to move fast, or you'll be the ones hunted. I looked at Arjun, feeling the weight of the mission pressing on me. We'll move fast. We'll stay one step ahead of them. We spent the next few hours making preparations. The stranger led us to a small, hidden office in the back of the warehouse where we began contacting people who could help us take down the syndicate. My sources in the media were discreet but powerful. I had worked with them before, and now I needed them more than ever. The documents we had were a gold mine, evidence of illicit deals, illegal business practices, and corruption at the highest levels. We selected the most explosive pieces, ones that would shock the city and get the public's attention without exposing us completely. These documents would force the syndicate into the light, and in that light, their lies would be exposed. The plan was set. I contacted my media contacts, and they promised to leak the information to the press at midnight. The story would be the first salvo in our war. But even as we prepared, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The alley outside the warehouse was silent, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The syndicate had eyes everywhere, and they would be looking for us. How long do you think we have? Arjun asked, his voice tense. Not long enough, I muttered, glancing nervously toward the door. We've made our move. They'll be coming after us soon. The stranger stepped closer, a glint of cold amusement in their eyes. That's the way it works. Once you strike, there's no going back. The only way to survive is to keep moving. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. We were in the eye of the storm now, and the only way out was forward. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. There was no turning back from this fight. But I had no choice. I had to finish what we had started. As midnight approached, the tension in the room grew thicker. We could hear the distant sounds of sirens, the city buzzing with activity, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. The leak was scheduled, and I could only hope that it would be enough to start the avalanche. We gathered the last of the files, making sure we had everything we needed for the next phase of the plan. But just as I was about to leave the office and check on the progress, a loud crash from the main door startled us. Someone's here, Arjun whispered, his eyes wide with alarm. The stranger didn't move, their face set in a grim expression. Get ready. The storm has come. I turned to Arjun, my heart pounding in my chest. Stay close. No matter what happens, we stick together. The door burst open, and several figures in dark clothing rushed into the room. They were armed, their eyes scanning the space as if they knew exactly where we were. The time for secrecy was over. We were exposed. Move! The stranger barked, pushing us toward the back exit. We didn't hesitate. We ran, dodging the men who were closing in on us, and made our way through a hidden passage in the back of the warehouse. The exit was only a few feet away, but the sound of footsteps behind us told me that we didn't have much time before they caught up. I could hear the stranger's voice ahead of us, calling for backup, but all I could focus on was the light at the end of the tunnel, the escape route that would lead us to freedom. We reached the exit, our breath ragged and our hearts pounding. But just as I thought we had made it, a figure stepped into the tunnel in front of us, blocking the way. It was one of the men from the syndicate, his gun trained on us with deadly precision. I felt Arjun's hand grip mine, his muscles tense as we faced the dead end. We had nowhere to go, nowhere to run. The stranger was still somewhere ahead, but I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. It was just us and the looming danger that was about to end this. You've made a mistake, you know, the man said, his voice calm as he eyed us. There's no escape from the syndicate. You should have stayed out of it while you had the chance. I stood frozen for a moment, looking at Arjun. He was breathing heavily, but there was a fire in his eyes, no longer a man broken by the past, but one who was ready to fight for his future. He nodded at me, a silent agreement. I stepped forward, defiant. You're wrong. You think you control everything, but you don't. We've already started something that you can't stop. The man scoffed, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could act, a loud crash echoed from behind him. The wall next to us burst open as the stranger, armed and ready, appeared with a few allies of their own. In an instant, the situation flipped. The syndicate's agent was taken down swiftly, and within moments, we had secured the exit. The stranger motioned for us to follow, and without hesitation, we bolted into the night, running as fast as we could. The city lights blurred around us, but there was a sense of finality in the air. This was the endgame. We didn't look back. Weeks passed, and the city was in turmoil. The leaked documents exposed the syndicate's web of corruption, and their empire began to collapse. It wasn't an easy victory, and there were losses along the way, but the truth had been set free. Arjun and I made sure our names remained hidden, operating from the shadows, ensuring that the syndicate would never rise again. We had fought back. We had survived. And we had made sure that the world knew the truth about those who had once held all the power. But for all the victories, there was one question that lingered. Was it worth it? The price we paid to bring down the syndicate was steep, and we would carry the scars of that battle for the rest of our lives. Yet, in the end, we found peace, together, away from the chaos that had once consumed us.